Final Fantasy VII Rebirth just came out, and I just gotta say, this game is freaking awesome. I was originally going to do a review on Final Fantasy XVI that came out last year, but I figured it'd be fun to put these two games together to see which Final Fantasy is actually better. Before I played Final Fantasy Rebirth, honestly, I was going to say Final Fantasy XVI was the best Final Fantasy since Final Fantasy X. But honestly, after playing Final Fantasy Rebirth, I think my opinion kind of changed a little bit. So in this video, I'm gonna put Final Fantasy VII Rebirth against Final Fantasy XVI and see what's better. I'll go over the graphics, visual, gameplay, side content, exploration, all that stuff. So let's get into it. Okay, so when comparing the visuals of both games, Final Fantasy XVI definitely looks a lot better. It is a way better looking game from a graphical standpoint, but Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, in my opinion, just has better world design, and it's just overall a lot more colorful. It has a lot more different environments that really stick out more. Like, I'm not comparing just the actual graphics, I'm comparing the overall look of both games. And in my opinion, I think the world of Final Fantasy VII just looks far better than Final Fantasy XVI's. Now, while Final Fantasy XVI is graphically better, honestly, I think the game really looks kind of bland in a lot of areas. Like, the towns are just really, unimpressive. The, I guess, open zones don't look that great, especially later in the game when they're all like black and gray and stuff. But I'm not saying the game's is ugly, it's just Final Fantasy just has a better world design. One thing I can say for sure though is Final Fantasy XVI in motion really does look a lot better than Rebirth, especially the boss battles. Like, the boss battles towards the end of the game are so ridiculous and over the top. In motion, it really looks fantastic. So because of that, honestly, I'm going to tie the games. They both have great, they're both, pretty good looking. Final Fantasy XVI has better graphics. Rebirth has a better, world design and, environments. So I'm going to tie both of these for visuals. Okay, now let's compare the soundtrack for both games. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Final Fantasy XVI both have a really good soundtrack. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth soundtrack is way bigger than Final Fantasy XVI's. Final Fantasy XVI, while is a pretty solid soundtrack, I honestly have to say Final Fantasy VII Rebirth takes the win, because like I said, it has far too many tracks compared to 16. Like, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has a track for almost everything. I mean, almost every single battle theme is different. Almost every single boss theme is different. It has a bunch of different towns that each have different, music for each town. Whereas Final Fantasy XVI, while it is a good soundtrack, really you only have one main battle theme. A few, two different boss themes or mini boss themes. The towns that they do have in this game all use the same track. I think there's 2 or different 3, depending what region you're in. And, like I said, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is just far bigger and has far more variety. That's the other thing. With Soken, as much as I love his music, it sort of kind of sounds, really samey, to be honest. It's all pretty, big and loud, and it's I play Final Fantasy XIV, so I get a lot of his music from that game, and because of that, I feel like there's not enough variety, whereas with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, you have all kinds of different type of music. It's not all the same genre, it really, has good variety. So because of that, overall, I think Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has the better soundtrack. Now moving on to the gameplay, I'm going to break it down in 2 parts, the combat and then the exploration and side content. So let's do the combat first. When it comes to the combat, both games are kind of actiony. Final Fantasy XVI is more like a character action game like Devil May Cry, whereas Final Fantasy VII Rebirth It's still pretty actiony. It's just not, you know, as fast paced as 16, sort of. I don't know, they're both pretty like the same pace if I were to be honest. As far as the combat goes, I gotta say, Final Fantasy Rebirth is a lot better. Now, I really did enjoy 16's combat, but for some reason, it felt like a downgraded Devil May Cry, which is odd because the same guy worked on it. I don't understand why it didn't feel as, fast or tight as Devil May Cry. The other reason why I think Final Fantasy Rebirth's combat is so much better is because there's a lot of variety, and unlike Final Fantasy 16, there is a small bit of strategy. So in Final Fantasy 16, for example, there is like literally no elemental weaknesses. So even though you can like sort of cast magic, which is pretty like it only does like chip damage, there's no elemental weaknesses to expose when you do that. So when you use fire, ice, or lightning or whatever, it doesn't do anything. Whereas in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, exposing the elements is pretty important. I mean, that's how you get like, a lot of damage and whatnot. Not only that, but Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has 6 playable characters, and each character does, something different. So you have like a long range fighter, a mage, a heavy hitter like Cloud, pretty fast paced combat with Tifa. Yuffie is so amazing at like crowd control. And Red, he's pretty good. I guess has a lot of support skills or abilities. But with all the different characters, it's just like there is way more you can do in Final Fantasy Rebirth than you can do in Final Fantasy 16. Not only that, but the way you build your characters in 7 Rebirth is like you can have like a bunch of different abilities equipped. You can have aerial abilities equipped. You can have synergy attacks. You can have magic. And that's with 3 different characters at once, and you're like switching between them, especially in tougher battles. It's just like the combat never got boring for me in Rebirth. Compared to Final Fantasy 16, honestly, I felt like I was doing the same exact attacks and the same, exact Eidolon abilities that you get. I mean, yeah, you can switch between like 3 different Eidolons that you get along, in the game. That, they each have their own abilities. You can build Clive up like that. But when it's just Clive, like I said, the combat gets really boring. There's no elemental weaknesses to expose. Final Fantasy Rebirth has like enemies that are only weak against magic, because they might have like, really high, defense or whatever. And, none of that is really present in 16, which is, kind of why I prefer 7 Rebirth's combat a lot better. The main thing Final Fantasy 16 does better is definitely the boss battles. Now, the boss battles in 7 Rebirth are fun. They're really good. But it's not as good as 16's, because 16's is just ridiculous. So it seems like ever since Final Fantasy Advent Children came out, it seems like Square Enix pretty much just wants to have combat that looks just like that. Final Fantasy Rebirth has like Advent Children type cutscenes in between the boss battles, mostly when they're changing phases, which is nice to look at. But with Final Fantasy 16, you're actually playing that. So all the crazy over-the-top stuff you would see in Advent Children and some of the big boss battles for 16, it's literally like playing that, especially towards the end of the game. It's absolutely nuts. And because of the boss battles being so great in 16, they're just so memorable. I really have to tie the combat for both of them, just because I just can't like pick Final Fantasy VII Rebirth over 16 when the boss battles are like the most memorable part of 16, and they're definitely my favorite parts when I replay them. While I do think that 16 has way better boss battles, like I said, the overall combat for Rebirth is just so much better. There's just so much more options, so much more to do, that I'm pretty much just going to tie them and make them even. So for this round, they're both going to be tied. So now, moving from combat, let's go to exploration and side quests. So as far as exploration goes in Final Fantasy 16, it's pretty damn non-existent. Basically, there's like 4 big open zones, and there's really not much to explore. I mean, I guess there's like monster hunts, which are pretty cool, and then it's really just an area for, side quests and stuff. I really don't think that there's much to explore, and honestly, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth does the exploration a lot better. There's a ton. There's like towers, life springs, uh, places where you can, like, if you have your chocobo, like dig up recipes for the crafting system. You can strengthen up your summons. I mean, at the end of the day, it is kind of like Ubisoft generic open world BS, but I ended up doing quite a bit of them. I think I completed like 3 to 4 of the regions, and then towards the end, I got kind of burnt out on them, especially Gangagla. However you say that, I hated exploring that area. I mean, the area is cool because it's a jungle, but damn, is it confusing. And aside from, all that stuff in the world map, there's also like, towns. Final Fantasy 16's towns are very, very small and very generic. Nothing to do in them. Whereas Final Fantasy Rebirth has really, really big, uh, towns, and they're all different. I mean, you have an amusement park, a beach resort, um, a steampunk harbor, a canyon. Like, there's a lot of different towns in this game, and they're very big, and they're cool to explore as well. Whereas Final Fantasy 16 didn't have any of that. I mean, it just has like a small little town with like an item shop and a place where you can go talk to someone to do a side quest. That's about it. So, like, as far as exploration goes, Final Fantasy 7 is a lot better. But, the other thing you do in JRPGs besides, exploration, combat, and whatnot are side quests. Side quests in 16, I'll be honest, they're not as bad as people were saying when it first came out. Um, but they are kind of generic MMO type side quests. Kind of like go here, get this, kill that. There are There are a few side quests that are kind of good from a story, standpoint. They're actually pretty dark. It's almost like Yoko Taro was in the office when they did these 2 side quests. Towards the end before the second time skip. There was one with like a little girl, like looking for her. I guess Clive thought it was a pet, but it was a person. Pretty messed up. The other side quest in that area was this guy just, killing the bears with monsters and stuff as a game. So, side quests like that were pretty, they were pretty good. But the other side quests are pretty, not gonna lie, they're kind of boring. But I did like the side quests towards the end of the game that were more character focused, like with, Clive and Joshua and Clive and Jill. So the ones towards the ends were pretty good. But I didn't really like a lot of the side quests in Final Fantasy 16, but I'm not saying they're bad. The other side quests in Final Fantasy 16 are monster hunts from Final Fantasy 12 and 15, and those are the ones I liked a lot. I mean, you get a little bit of a challenge, some experience points. They're fun. I love killing monsters, so that's not a bad, side quest. But Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth side quests are much better. So a lot of the side quests revolve around like Cloud and a certain character, and basically it's so you can get their relationship up for the Gold Saucer date. I really did quite enjoy these because there's a lot of, good development and banter between Cloud and whoever he's doing the side quest with. And the rewards are also worth it because, like I said, it builds up your affection, and you get, skill points to, better level up your character. Um, the other side quests that were in this game that were pretty good there were 2 of them. They were pretty long. There was Queen's Blood, and then there was the Pearl Relic side quest. Queen's Blood was really fun. I love that mini game. Like, the further you go, you can challenge characters. It's almost like freaking Yu-Gi-Oh or something, and like the plot gets kind of crazy towards the end, like with some evil queen or something. I kind of liked it. And then the Proto Relic side quest is where you go to each region, and what I like is you're doing different things in each region. So one region you're like hunting down bandits, and then in another one you're playing uh, Fort Condor, and then in another one you're like fighting in a simulator that the Turks use. And I like how they switched it up in each region. The payoff towards the end is so you can go up against Gilgamesh, which was the best and hardest fight in the game. And I loved it, especially the Battle on the Big Bridge remix. Amazing. So yeah, as far as side quests go, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth definitely has it. And then the other thing I think I should touch up upon are the mini games. So there are a lot of mini games in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Final Fantasy 16 has none. Now, I know the mini games are kind of getting like, people don't like them as much, but I really like how it kind of, gives you a little bit of downtime. I mean, mini games aren't bad, especially when they're fun. Now, I'm not saying they're all good, but, they're not all bad either. And the good ones are mostly the ones at the Gold Saucer. I definitely love Chocobo Racing, and I absolutely love the Star Fox-like shooter. But yeah, like I said, the mini games are fun. It gives you a little bit of break, from the main story and all the combat. So as far as the exploration and side quests go, I'm giving this to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Okay, so the last part I want to compare are the stories. Now honestly, I'm not really going to talk too much about the stories just because 16 is still recent and Rebirth literally just came out like a month ago. So what I can say is that they're both very good, and I don't have a preference. I'm going to tie this one just because, like I said, they're very good and they just tell different stories. 7 Rebirth is more about, like, saving the world and, that whole thing with Aerith, that infamous scene. And then 16's is a very, very personal journey with Clive. And it's also a little bit political. So, like I said, they both have great stories. I think 16 has a lot more cutscenes though, and is a little bit more lengthy as far as the actual story goes. I'm not saying game length. I think Rebirth is far longer, but I think as far as watching cutscenes and dialogue, I think 16 has a lot more. One thing I can say though is as far as the prologues go, I have to say 16's is way better. I mean, Rebirth's is very iconic, but I don't know. I remember playing the prologue for 16 and I was just so invested in it. The stakes were just so high. The battle with Phoenix and Ifrit, the scene after that, I was just hooked. Now, maybe it's because I seen the Calm flashback quite a few times, but I don't think it had the same impact as the beginning of Final Fantasy 16. And as far as the endings go, like I said, I won't really talk about them. If I were comparing the endings, I gotta say Rebirth kind of stuck out a little bit more. And I'm pretty sure you know why. But with that said, I'm gonna tie it for the stories. They were both great. Okay, now that we're at the end and I compared everything, let's do a quick recap. So, the visuals are tied. As far as music goes, I think Final Fantasy VII was better just because it had far more tracks and almost each and every one of them were just very good. The combat is tie. I mean, they both have great combat. I think Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is far more flexible and less repetitive, but the boss battles in 16 are just far too memorable. So I tied them. The exploration and side content, definitely Final Fantasy VII. There's just so much to do in there, and it was fun doing it. Story tied, they're both pretty good. So yeah, the overall winner is definitely Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Now my final thoughts was trying very hard not to play, favorites or, be biased, but Final Fantasy VII Rebirth really is one of the best Final Fantasy games to come in years. I mean, that's exactly what I thought about 16 before I played Rebirth. But Final Fantasy VII Rebirth just reminded me what a Final Fantasy game should be, what it used to be like. And I don't, it's just kind of like 16 was a great game. It had great combat, but it was just a character action game with a really good, lengthy story. It wasn't really Final Fantasy, and I really hate to say that because, I mean, Final Fantasy can be whatever it wants, but playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth just reminded me what Final Fantasy was and what it used to be. Now, I still think, Square, if they want to do like action games with stories, that's fine. But if they do that, can we at least get classic feeling Final Fantasy games like Rebirth? It was pretty much Final Fantasy VII modern, and that's what I want my Final Fantasy to be going forward. So yeah, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is the winner. I hope you guys like this video. Let me know in the comment, what did you like more, Rebirth or 16? Thanks for watching.